Hello and welcome back. So happy to have you here again. It has been a little bit since I was able to chat with you. I think it's been, I don't know, what, 2 or 3 weeks since we've had a Saturday video, and it is high time. This has been such a busy time of year for me. So today's video is just a little bit of catch up, what's been happening, some new fabric purchases, viewer question. We're just gonna have a little chatty morning, and I'm excited to have you all here once more. So first, let's chat about another cute t-shirt design. Well, hoodie design. Could be a t-shirt, but right now it's only on hoodies. Let me know if you want this on t-shirts also. This is a new design that Eleni has for us. This fun, I don't know, comic book themed sewing design, and I think it's so cute. She's always so fun when she comes up with her new designs for us, because it's something that I wouldn't have considered, or she comes up with these on her own, and it's just fun to see what she wants to design. And so this is now available over in the Coriander Quilts merch shop. Let me know if you want to see it on t-shirts, because we can make that happen too. Now, with that being said, I wanted to let you know that the only place that Eleni sells her designs is in the Coriander Quilts merch shop on Etsy. And I always have that linked in the description box below whenever I'm wearing one of the shirts she's designed for us. And I wanted to let you know that because this week we have found out that there are some sellers that are stealing her artwork and selling it in other places. And they're actually crediting her, like it will say whatever item she's designed by Eleni Yoder for Coriander Quilts. So they're crediting her for the design, but selling it in places that we don't know where all it's at. We know it, we've seen it on Walmart, we've seen it on some various t-shirt shops just online, and usually when this happens, it's a seller that is overseas who's taken the item, and it becomes really difficult to try to get those taken down. So if you're interested in purchasing her artwork, her designs for us, make sure that you are only purchasing from the Coriander Quilts merch shop over on Etsy. It's the only place that she is the seller. If you're purchasing it anywhere else, even someplace you might trust, like Walmart.com, if you're purchasing it from somewhere else, she's getting none of the profits and somebody else is making money off of her artwork. So just wanted to give you guys a heads up. That happens pretty often in the quilting world with quilt patterns or maybe PDF patterns. So I'm pretty used to having that happen to me, where someone is just very much stealing something that I have made. But it was really disappointing to have someone steal from her, because she's just a 15-year-old trying to save up a little bit of money. So we just wanted to make you aware of that, so you know where to purchase the shirts that she's getting credit for them. Anyways, so that's kind of a bummer to have to share that information, but I know it happens, and you just don't like to see it happen to your kids. But oh well, she's just going to keep on coming up with new fun designs and keep designing and keep at it. And yeah, she's taking it very well. Anyways, okay, so now we are going to move on to what has been going on here just in the Yoder household. It's been a busy summer. I have an extra fabric line coming out next year. So when I have that extra line, the two at the end of the summer fall really close together as to when they show to quilt shops. So it keeps me hopping this time of year. I think since we last chatted, well, I was just wrapping up turning in all of the quilt patterns for the first line, which quilt shops are going to see late September, beginning of October. So you guys will get to start seeing those fabrics and new quilt patterns then also. And then I had to quickly wrap up another batch of patterns that quilt shops will get to see those fabrics and patterns. I think those are December, I want to say. Maybe November, December, something like that. I lose track of the dates. Later this year, they will see those, and then you guys will get to see those fabrics and quilt patterns at that time. And then I decided that I was also going to make all of my samples for that first round of patterns. So there's 7 new quilts, 7 new patterns with the fabrics that are showing the end of September. And I wanted to make all of my own samples for those. So I have a sample maker that I work with pretty often. I love having her make some of my different samples, but this time around I wanted to make them up myself. I was looking forward to working with those fabrics, and I had a really short timeline that I needed to get those quilts done in time that I could go over my patterns really nicely and just make sure that everything was in good shape. So with the mailing time, mailing to and fro when I send things out to a sample maker, it also worked better just to have me make those myself. So I made 7 quilt tops, and then we got those off to the quilter just this week. So those are ready to go. My sister Nicole was helping me de-thread those quilt tops and package those up for shipping. So that was a big help, because that always takes a little bit of time to de-thread the quilt tops for the long armor. So we got those taken care of. What else happened? I know there was other things. Oh, so the writing of the patterns, that second batch of patterns, that took a bit of time. And then I also got all of the patterns written for the Callie & Co. mystery block of the month that are coming up. We're going to be kicking that off in January. So all of those patterns needed to be written as well. I got all of those patterns written, and that's always a big project to check off my to-do list. So I was happy to get all of those written. Let's see, what else? Eleni, speaking of Eleni, we chatted about her earlier, but she was in Florida for a couple weeks with my sister and her husband and my niece. And they were actually there during the Hurricane Debbie that came through, and they were staying right on Siesta Key. And so their trip, they were there for about 2 weeks, and the weekend that they were planning to fly back, the Monday, was right when that hurricane came through. So that delayed Eleni getting home a little bit longer than we expected, just a day. I think their flight was delayed just a day. And I was worried because they were out on the key, on Siesta Key. And I thought, well, that's not good when you have a hurricane coming and you're right beside the ocean. But thankfully, actually, where they were at seemed to be in better shape than in Sarasota, where there was a lot of flooding. We have friends and relatives that are down there, and I kept seeing a lot of flooding issues in Sarasota, and I know that they're still recovering from some of the pretty significant flooding that happened in Sarasota. So I was actually thankful then that they were out closer to the ocean. I'm not quite sure how that worked, that the flooding wasn't as bad over there as it was more in the city, in the town, but that seemed to be the case. So we got our Eleni back home safe and sound, and so I was thankful for that. But that was, I don't know, I'm not used to having my girlies just off on their own. Both girls have been gone a lot this summer. My oldest daughter has been gone since May. She is living a couple hours away and interning, and so she'll be gone a lot through December. She can come home every now and then, so we get to see her here and there, but for the most part she's not been home since the end of May. And then Eleni was gone for a few weeks this summer, so it's been Ryan and I by ourselves for a little bit more than I was expecting us to be alone. But it's been interesting. It does allow me to get a lot of things done. When I was talking about writing all of those patterns, that happened when my husband was out of town for a week, and I could just sit down. You don't have to worry about supper. It was just Eleni and I. We could just kind of pop here and there and make something for ourselves. So that was kind of fun. It lets me get things done when I have some of those other household tasks not on my schedule. So it's fun. It just felt a little bit different this summer, and it has kept me busy in different ways. So I think that's kind of what my work schedule has been looking like. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to share with you guys. Sometimes it's kind of fun just to get a little behind the scenes peek into how things work around here, I suppose. But it's just, yeah, it's felt just a little bit different having my family spread out a little bit more, going in different directions. And I know we're getting to that stage. My oldest is 19, Eleni is 15. She should be able to start to get her license here in October. So that is That's something new too. We've just had kind of a summer of change, and it's been good, but it just feels a little different. So I think that is everything work related. So let's move on to that viewer question of the video that I mentioned earlier. This comes to us from Leanne Sturkle. She says, Corey, you often mention using Minky for your quilt backings. I've not yet used Minky due to my fear that it may be more difficult to work with. Can you talk a bit about your experiences with Minky and any tips you can share that will dispel this silly fear I seem to have? Thank you. I love all your videos. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for this wonderful question. It's true, I do work with Minky quite a bit. I love using it if it's a quilt I'm going to be gifting, and I know that the recipient is going to be using it a lot, or if it is a quilt that is going to end up on our couch and my family is going to be using it a lot. We love those Minky-backed quilts. Those are always the one we reach for when we want a cozy blanket. So with that being said, I do find it trickier to work with. I think it's stretchier. It's definitely heavier. I don't like machine quilting with it on my sewing machine, but to be fair, I really don't like quilting large projects on my sewing machine at all, whether they are Minky backed or not. So I'm sure part of that plays into how I feel about quilting with Minky myself. Let me think. What else? Binding. Binding with Minky, if you're doing machine binding, also is a little trickier just because it's stretchy. And it just seems no matter how much I clip or pin, it just stretches more than quilting cotton does. And the other thing too is I like using a 2-inch binding for my quilts, and I have used 2-inch binding when I've backed with Minky for machine binding, but it's a tight fit in there because the Minky is thicker. So you might also find that you need to increase the width of your binding strips from what you normally use to accommodate that thickness. I did grab a quilt here to show you how the binding looks, cut at 2 inches. And if you aren't familiar with my machine binding technique, I do have a machine binding tutorial video here on YouTube that I shared a number of years ago, and it shows why and how I use that 2-inch binding for machine binding. But this quilt, this, by the way, is my Homey quilt. It is in the Moda All-Stars Layer Cake book. I'll make sure and link to that because it's such a nice pattern. Just 2 layer cakes, no background fabric, and it makes such a nice sized quilt. So for this quilt, I did use 2-inch binding when I machine bound this. You can see how this looks here. So you can do it. It's a tight fit. You got to kind of crunch that thickness in there, but you can do it. I don't know if it's something I would always want to do. I like that 2-inch binding so well for machine binding. So I put up with the fuss of the thickness of Minky when I'm machine binding just because I love a 2-inch binding for machine binding. But there you can see how that looks. Also, while I have this quilt here, the other thing that comes up with Minky is to pre-wash, to not pre-wash. How is your quilt going to wash up? For this quilt, it's a well-loved quilt. So it's been washed, used, washed many times. None of my fabrics were pre-washed. As I said, it was a layer cake quilt, so we don't tend to pre-wash layer cakes. So nothing was pre-washed, and you can see it washes up really nicely. And that has been my experience overall with Minky. I'm not usually a pre-washer for my quilt top fabrics. Well, actually any of my quilt fabrics. I am an occasional pre-starcher. Typically I am pre-starching only if I am pre-starching to test a pattern to make sure that I can say, yes, there's plenty of fabric in the fabric requirements if you choose to pre-starch. Sometimes, depending on the project, I really like to have a more in-depth hands-on approach to double checking that. So I would pre-starch in that case, or if it's really small piecing, 3-inch blocks or smaller, just very small, then I might pre-starch. So for the most part, I don't pre-starch and I don't pre-wash. So you can see how it washes up with no pre-washing or pre-starching. That's how it looks. So that was a question that comes up. What else did I want to chat about? Most long armors are happy to work with Minky. You can double check with them to make sure that that is the case. My long armor does specify that he would prefer a name brand Minky, and he specifically likes Shannon Minky, which is awesome because Shannon comes in a 90-inch wide Minky, so no need to piece your backing. Unless you're doing something really big, maybe you would find you need to piece the backing. But I do not like piecing Minky for backings. Minky is messy to work with. You're going to end up with a lot of little fabric bits because it's a messy thing to work with. And if you have to piece your backing, that seam is going to be kind of bulky because it's just a thicker fabric. So I avoid piecing Minky for backings. So Shannon is great with that 90-inch wide. I also like using Moda, has a couple different options in a 60-inch wide. So if I have a smaller quilt top that I want to use Minky, I will opt for the Moda version. But yeah, he says name brand is the way to go if you're sending Minky out to your long arm quilter. And you might check with them to see if they do have a specific brand preference like my long arm quilter does. In regard to, this would be in regard to machine quilting, but also kind of in regard to using batting. We experimented with not using batting in one of my quilts. It was actually this hem quilt. I've shown this on the channel here very often. And this is a quilt that I made a few years ago. I chatted about it quite a bit because this was one of the works in progress that I was working on here on the channel for quite a while. And this is a heavy quilt. And so when I send it to David to long arm, I did not think I wanted to use any batting in it because I didn't want it to get heavier. So these centers of the blocks here are made using tea towels. This was before, these are from the Fancy That Design House website. Stephanie is the owner of that website. She now designs for Moda Fabrics, so you can get her designs on quilting cottons, quilting fabric. But at the time I was collecting these tea towels to use in this quilt, she was not designing for Moda. So I was just collecting these tea towels, and they're a little bit of a different weight than the quilting cottons would be. And so I backed all of them with a fusible interfacing, which added a bit of weight to this quilt. And then with the Minky for the back, that adds more weight to this quilt. And so I was debating about using batting for this and thought I didn't want to use it. So David got the quilt top, loaded it up on his machine, and started quilting it out without any batting in it. And he sent me a picture after he had done, up here in the corner here, probably this red guy, I think, after he had started on this, and the quilting just sat on the top of the block. You couldn't really, it didn't show up as nicely as it did with the batting added. And so he sent me a picture and he said, hey, I think we're going to want to put batting in here because the quilting is not looking as nice as it would with batting. So for that reason, we added batting, and he went with a very lightweight, I think it's a bamboo batting is what he ended up using in here, just because it's lighter weight than some of the other batting options. So we did end up using batting. So that is something to keep in mind when you're thinking about if you want to use batting in your quilt or not for Minky backed quilts. It will, lighten things up if you don't use the batting, but you do have to consider then how your quilting might look. So that's something else to think about. Now let me see if there was anything else I wanted to chat about. I think that kind of sums up some of the different things that I've noticed with Minky for backing. It's an awesome choice. Can be a little bit fussy, but I don't think it's anything we can't work around. I think if you're just aware of it going into using Minky, so you know what the hangups might be. Maybe you need to increase your binding size. Maybe you decide you don't want to machine quilt it yourself on your own machine. Give some thought to your batting. Do you want to use batting? How important is the quilting on it? And make your decisions accordingly. But it does make for a super soft quilt. The quilting always looks so pretty on the back of Minky's. That's one thing that I think is really fun. It just shows up so nice. It's so cozy and it just makes for a really delightful quilt. So I will also link to videos where I chatted about this quilt, because usually when I share it again, I get questions about it. So there's no pattern for it. I just bordered out my tea towel panel squares after I cut them down to size and sewed them all together. So that's a little bit about Minky for backing. And speaking of Tilda, a lot of those fabrics, well, all of those bordered fabrics were Tilda. So it was the tea towel centers and then the Tilda Fabrics for those borders. So speaking of Tildas, I've had some Tilda purchases I made recently that I thought would be fun to share with you. I haven't purchased any Tilda fabric for quite a while. I have a really nice stash of Tilda fabrics because I have been purchasing them over the years, starting in the, I don't know, 2000 I don't know. I'm not even going to try to guess. Before they were available here in the United States, I was buying Tilda because I think they're so pretty. But it has been a couple years since I purchased any, and I recently made some purchases, and one of my local quilt shops had gotten in some Tilda at their shop, so they were kind enough to gift me this little bundle here and these bundles here for some projects I had done for them. And so I got these, which I had been eyeing, these little fabrics. This is from their Creating Memories, from Tilda's Creating Memories line of fabric, and so are these three. So these are all from there. And then these are all from the Creating Memories line of fabric. And then these are two little bundles of basics. So the quilt shop gave me this little bundle and these. And then I knew I just needed to add in, let's see if I can show these to you any better. I knew I wanted to add in these other guys too because they're so pretty. But just this really cute little, dainty little florals. I don't want to open up my bundle because I know I'm not going to get it in there as cute as it is right now. But then really pretty little basic prints to go with too. So like that little dot there. And they're in different palettes. I'm going to pull some of these middle ones out though so that you can see these as well. There, now you can see those a little bit better. I just think they're so pretty. I like the mix, the small prints with then those kind of almost homespun-y type. They're not homespun fabrics. They just kind of look like homespun prints. So they have a fall bundle, and then there is like a little spring bundle. And I just think they're just the prettiest. Like, isn't that just so pretty? Like, that's beautiful. I like this yellowy, kind of mustard yellowy shade. Let's pull out some of these middle ones. Like this little blue guy. They have just a little bit of texture. Put back in there. What else do we have in here? Little flowers. I just think they're so cute. If I didn't mind if my bundles got all messed up, I'd open them up for you and show you, but they're just so cute like this. Okay, so that's the spring bundle. Then we have sort of this red and green Christmassy bundle. Oh, isn't that pretty? Love the addition of that brownishy taupe color in there. What do we have in here? Okay, of course you need some ginghams, right? Let's pull these out and give it another spin. These are available online or in local quilt shops right now. So if you look for Tilda Creating Memories, you're going to be able to see these prints better than what I can show them to you here. Partly because I don't want to open them all up. But I love this blue color. I don't know what I'm going to do with these, which is not unusual for me and my Tildas. But just like you saw with that tea towel quilt, I didn't know that I was going to use Tilda for that project, but they just coordinated so nicely with those tea towels and were just what I needed for that project. So I do like having them on hand. I know that they are projects that I'm going to use. And actually, I'm going to pause just a second because there's something else I can show you that I think some of these would be so pretty with. So hold on just a second. I'll be right back. All right, I am back. This is a fannel. I guess that'd be a combination of fabric, panel, turns into fannel. This is a panel that is from an upcoming line. It's called Farm and Garden by Kathy Holden, and it's a Moda fabric, and it is going to be coming out, and I just thought it was so pretty. But I also think that, okay, so you have that this quilt here that we just chatted about tucked in the back of your mind, something similar to that quilt, but made using some of these Tildas and this panel. I think would be just so pretty. And I think these fabrics would work really well. So I actually thought that I might want to do this, but I didn't exactly lay these fabrics out with them. But let's do that. Let's do that a little bit. See what it looks like. Okay, so, you know, you've got your little blue panel here, right? And even like this green in here might be really pretty with kind of this green that's already in here. And look, slide this over here and then put your greens and reds here, right? That's super pretty, isn't it? I didn't think I was wrong. Even some of those yellows in there would be pretty. Greens again over here. So this is, you know, kind of the greens. There's a little bit of the orange. I don't know, maybe just little patchworky borders around it. Over here, we've got the blues and the reds again. Come on, that's pretty. Look at that. I think that would be just wonderful. Okay, so this makes me even more excited. See, now I want to dig into my little bundle. Let's look at this here. This one has like some oranges and browns, and I just know that's going to be delightful. Ooh, see? That's going to be pretty. That's beautiful. Okay, so that's the reason why sometimes you buy your little stash of fabrics in advance, because then just the right project comes along and you have just what you need to make your project. Anyhow, so there that panel is again. It's just a really pretty feed sack panel. I think that's so pretty. It's repeated, so I have 2 repeats of it. So let me show you here. I'll lay this down again so that you can see. We kind of looked at a lot of that top row already. But there's the full width right there. You can see all of those pretty well. And then the next row has, whoop, move out of the way, Tildas. There we go. Next row has these, and then it repeats. So you can see what those look like. I will make sure and link to more information about this line in that description box so that you know when it comes out. I wish I could tell you exactly which month, but it's coming out in a few months, I think, and it's such a pretty one. And there would also be coordinating cotton prints that would go with this as well from Moda. So, see, I didn't know I was even going to show you that today. Then I started talking about those Tildas and I remembered, oh, I think that panel would look pretty. Sure enough, I'm excited about that. That kind of makes me want to dive into this project. That will be a fun one to sew up. But it's always about making the time, isn't it? Trying to think what I have to do next on my schedule. I have my to-do list upstairs and it is getting a little bit more, I'm not in the weeds quite as hard as I had been. So that's good. I'm getting things checked off. So maybe I would have time to do a little bit of a fun personal project. But anyhow, okay, I think that is everything I wanted to share with you today. Just kind of a newsy, let's get caught up again because it's been a while sort of post today. So hopefully you've enjoyed following along. Let me know what you're working on. Yeah, if you have any questions that you want answered in an upcoming video, you can leave that in the comments below too. Thanks so much for stopping by, and I will catch you again next time.